So there's a design team, which is what I went to school for, right? So I kind of I learned that in school and then learned kind of a new part of the business. So there's a design team that, does the mood boards, goes and finds fabric. They work with factories. They create the collection. They get it made. And then there's somewhere in there that they figure out, okay, this is a collection we're going to present at trade shows or in our showroom. And then buyers are usually like boutiques or retailers. So they're Zappos, Nordstrom's, any boutique that you might go in and out of. Then they go to these shows or go to their showrooms and they look at the collection like, sweet, I want to buy this, 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 and this. And this is how many quantities, blah, 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 blah. And then they have like the price to it. And then there's a suggested retail, because it's illegal to tell people what to price it at, but it's definitely a hard suggestion.
Really?
Yeah. So
it's illegal to tell people what they should price it at?
As a brand, you can't say like you have to put it at this retail price. So you always see it's like a suggested retail cost. But obviously if you undercut the market, then they'll be like, hey, like that's not what we kind of agreed on, and then they'll just stop selling you.
I was gonna say, at some point they just stop selling.
They'll just stop selling you. Yeah.
And
so
how would they know what you're selling it for?
Oh, they know.
They know?
Yeah. I mean,
what if you're like at a swap meet?
Well, that might not be the real brand.
That's a knockoff.
That might be something different.
You telling me that's not a real Versace shirt?
That's not Supreme.
So the buyer would go and pick that, and it's an interesting business for sure. Because if the big box retailers don't buy certain items, but you loved it, then they don't have the quantity to produce that product. So a lot of times that's why. And I think in the last couple years, or in the last 10 years, it's became very bland in the fashion industry, or you're not seeing a lot of risk, because if Nordstrom, for example, which has a big buying power, didn't buy certain SKUs, which is an item, then it wouldn't go to production because it wouldn't hit the minimums.
Oh, wow.
So then you're almost like limited. So there's often times that you'll buy this awesome collection in half, or some of the items don't get produced. So then you're kind of like held to whatever the bigger people make. And I think that's where that huge movement with makers and creators and Etsy's and Handmade has really been able to make their comeback and be able to really be, forward facing, because they should. And it offers something unique. Obviously you're connecting to another human being. So that storyline, and I think it's a beautiful thing because you get something kind of unique and different.
So maybe you could maybe you could. Maybe
I'll
could.
Pass.
No, I was trying to mix words. I was trying to say shed some light, and I kind of just mix them together.
Yeah. Ooh, word, shite.
Maybe you could shed some light on people like or like companies like Burlington Coat Factory, right? Where they'll have like a price tag that says like, oh, this shirt was originally $129.99, but now it's $8.99.
Yeah.
Like, is that because they just weren't getting bought out, and then like, can anybody price it at that point, or is that point like authorized to price it that low because it didn't sell?
Yeah, so that's definitely so. I did go and move here and worked at the Zappos side. My last 6 months at Zappos, I actually went and worked on the 6 p.m. side, which is their discounted site. So it's a lot of things on there that just a reduced price. So that was super interesting to see that side of buying and how that world works. So at one point, a lot of times there's a few scenarios, right? Either they don't want to conform to whatever big box retailer is telling them. So we're going to produce it. We're going to hit our minimums, whatever, because we believe this will still do well. We'll get it out there and we'll test it. And at that point, it could be Express, so their own brand, right? So they don't need a different buyer, like they can just put it in their stores. And then at the end of the season or close towards the end, they have so much inventory. So like, okay, we're just going to cut this down in half or 75%. And at that point, they're still probably fine because they have to make it. And then if you sell it at one point, then they mark it up again. So that you have a lot of room if you're at the actual brand level. So if you go to Aldo and they're 80% off, there's either they're breaking even and or they still have a little bit of margin in there.
See, I always thought when you saw something especially like at a name brand store, if you saw something for like
a clearance
25% off, you're like, yeah, but they're still making 50% profit on top of that, because like you would never, because sometimes you'll see like 80% off, but they're still making money, because otherwise they wouldn't be selling that, right?
It just depends. Sometimes that inventory is just dead. Get rid of it.
Really?
Get some money in so you can use that.
Break even, basically.
But break even, or just get money in so you can just reinvest it, hopefully in something that will just make up the loss, right? And there's calculated costs, obviously, for overhead, the employees and taxes and all that other stuff that, when you look at a garment, what it's made for, call it $5, then you have to put that overhead on it too and make up the difference. But 100%, if it's at a brand level and it's 25-50%, they're still making theirs, because a lot of times if they were to go to wholesale, which would put it in front of a buyer, they put it at a price that the buyer could buy it at. So call it a shirt at the retail's $20, most likely they're selling it to a buyer for $10. So you would assume that they got it made for $5.
Plus,
right?
So people who are selling things or who buy things wholesale are getting it for such a big discount because they're buying in bulk, right?
Yeah, and then how big your buy is, and you can work out discount. So then the 50% margin can be more or whatever.
So was 6 p.m. basically like Ross? Like how Ross is?
Kind
Because I've never been to a 6 p.m.
If you just go to 6pm.com on your interwebs.
Is it only online?
It's only online. Yeah. So, but so some of it was just stock that didn't sell, that Zappos would just move over, right?
Okay.
And so the idea was to preserve the Zappos site, so it didn't ever seem like, I'm just gonna wait, it's gonna go on sale, right? So instead they could move it over to a secondary website, so you didn't feel like every time you went to Zappos, you could just go to the sell section and just shop on and not,
that's
so
smart.
yeah, it was a smart move. And then in other cases, there's a buying team that would just go to the brands and say, like, what extra stock do you have in? So at some point in the season, if it's past a point that they feel like they can really sell it at full price, so halfway through the season, they'll start slowly marking it down. And the further and further it gets away, the more the discount gets. So at some level, you're playing roulette at this point, because you're like, okay, I'm at the mercy of one, Zappos not selling all the inventory to come to here, which you don't really get to buy, that just gets moved over. And two, I'm at the mercy of that these brands have any inventory, and good inventory, that I can buy discounted to then put on the site and still make a margin in some case too. So then this whole movement around private label, essentially, which has always been relevant, but then there's SKUs that are made at that are made third tier. There's different tiers, and so it might look like the same shoe, but their stitching and or maybe some of the materials are just a little bit on the
just kind of like
whoa.
What was that technique that they do on Amazon? Is that what it's called? White labeling?
Yeah, there's white labeling.
So in the fashion world, it's the same thing?
Yeah, so not in this scenario, because it's still that it would be Aldo to Aldo. They just might design it a little bit differently, or it wouldn't be the exact same shoe, but it'd be within the collection, just designed differently. So then you could have those kind of markdowns and give that value.
That's crazy.
But yeah, white labeling and private labeling is if we were to build, if we're going to build a brand right now and put our label in it, a lot of times like this is actually Life is Beautiful. This blank, this piece, this jacket exists, and then they put the art and tag on it, right? So they're white labeling something that already exists, rather than them like drawing it out, making their own patterns. Like, this is the collection I want to make.
Now, what's the process of white labeling? Is that like a committee they have to go to do that, or because I don't know how clothes work? Is there like a trademark on a design, like a certain? I mean, I'm sure not, because it's camo, right? You can't really trademark camo.
Yeah,
unless
there's the fashion industry within like the legal side and what's trademarked and not. It's pretty crazy.